I had a client, for example, for 10 years before I told him that I was going to replace myself. Now, I know for a fact that this is a big roadblock for pretty much every bookkeeper, where they have these legacy clients and they're thinking, I want to grow my business. I now realize, okay, yes, I do want to take that step. But you can't do that, obviously, unless you set the expectation or change the expectation with your legacy clients. And so that means a conversation.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer. It is always great having today's guest on the show. She brings amazing insight every time she joins me. She's the co-founder of Pure Bookkeeping, author of the E-Myth Bookkeeper, and a fantastic human being. Debbie Roberts, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm very excited to be here.
It is always such a pleasure to have you. And I know in my travels of late to a few different conferences, you're one of the favorites out there that people listen to your episodes and absolutely love listening to what you have to say. And so it's another opportunity for us to dive deep into the things that you're seeing that are happening in the industry and what's really going on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And so for those of you that have already met Debbie Roberts, you will know exactly who she is. But for those of you who this may be your very first episode, we will put links in the show notes for you to go back and have a listen to some of the earlier editions where Debbie's been on the show with us. So we're just going to jump right into all of it right now and start talking about what's going on in the industry. And really, Deb, you've been mentoring bookkeepers for years. And this whole concept of the phases of business, where people are from startup to moving their business to maybe six figures and then beyond, the next phase of growth for a particular bookkeeping business owner. And of late, you've been doing a lot of work, which you like to call the next growth phase. Tell me a little bit more about that phase and what you've been experiencing.
Sure. There is, having been through it myself, and the pain associated with moving from, so what we're talking about is you've reached that point where you're running a successful practice, so you're on your own, you're turning over the amount of money that you think is suitable and what you're aiming for a successful practice. You full up and you start to think, I probably need to recruit. And that is a tipping point. Well, the decision point then is, am I going to keep growing or will I stay just on my own? In my own experience, I came across that as well. It was kind of a quite a barrier, which it is for most bookkeepers who reach that tipping point. But what I decided was I had a pretty big vision to replace my husband's income in 10 years. So I knew I needed to grow beyond myself. And I made a decision as well that I didn't want to turn people away because I knew I could help them and I really felt for them. And so I wanted to keep growing. So I knew then the next phase was going to be recruiting, which was pretty scary.
You know, this whole concept of turning away clients is difficult. That's something I hear often. You're in the business to help people, and so to have to turn them away is it's really difficult. And I think on the other side too is you want to be able to grow your income.
Yes.
And so turning away clients is kind of reverse thinking. But at the same time, even if you did add those clients, if you're not in the right position in your business, if you don't have things set up properly, it can actually do the reverse of growing your business.
Oh, you will absolutely grow a world of pain, which is what I did for some time before I met Peter Cook, who was my business coach for 10 years, those of you who don't know my story, and then worked on, it was Peter that first said, do you think if you took the systems you had in your head and wrote them down and had taught someone to follow those, would that work? Would that solve your problem? And I went, oh, yeah, maybe that could. And that was a 10-year journey, creating those systems. But it was those systems that actually enabled me to grow a large business, a successful bookkeeping business with 12 staff.
Yeah, and a breakthrough really for you was creating the systems and processes that would enable your business to run in a form having automation.
Oh, yeah, well, and run without me. So that was my main goal. Although my big vision was to replace my husband's income, along the way of that, I also had my own personal goal, which was to do less bookkeeping. And it's when you get to the point where you're doing less bookkeeping that it frees up more time to work on your business. It gives you flexibility. It gives you the ability to have the lifestyle that you want while still earning the income. So when you're on your own, if you don't work, you don't get paid. So it's growing your business past that means that you still get paid and you're not actually doing the billable hours.
Mm. So if we were to look, there's going to be listeners that are at this phase in their business where they want to take it to the next level. Where should they start thinking?
The very first starting point is they need to talk to all their clients, because I'm sure they'll be in the same position as I was, because I hadn't set expectations that I was growing my business. So I had these legacy clients. When I got to that point where I thought, yes, I do want to grow my business, I had these legacy clients where I hadn't set that expectation with them. It was when I started working with them, it's, hi, I'm Debbie Roberts, I'm going to be your bookkeeper, let's get started. And I didn't have any systems in place. It was all in my head. So they engaged me to do the bookkeeping, and I was the one with the intellectual property, and I got the work done, and I went away and came back the next day or the next week or whatever it was. So these legacy clients, and you get very attached to them as well. And I had a client, for example, for 10 years before I told him that I was going to replace myself. Now, I know for a fact that this is a big roadblock for pretty much every bookkeeper, where they have these legacy clients and they're thinking, I want to grow my business. I now realize, okay, yes, I do want to take that step. But you can't do that, obviously, unless you set the expectation or change the expectation with your legacy clients. And so that means a conversation. And it took me 12 months to have that conversation with each of my clients. That's how many clients I had. And I had to go to each one of them and sit down and explain. It was a difficult conversation. It was quite often more difficult. I made it into a more difficult conversation in my mind than it actually turned out to be. There wasn't anyone that said, oh, well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to put in other staff, I'm not going to put you, you can go. No, not one person, I didn't lose one client because of this conversation, because of explaining that I was transitioning. But in our own fears, we're afraid that we might actually lose those clients, or we're afraid that how are they going to react? Will they get angry? And I've got to deal with all of that. It's quite a difficult time. And that 12 months, I remember that quite vividly, even all these years since then. It's quite vivid, the feeling I had of being anxious about every single conversation. I was actually avoiding having the conversation with one particular client. I'd gone through everyone, and there was this one client where I was going there a day a week, on site, a day a week. So it was one of my best clients. He was solid. He paid me on time. He was, I was part of the family. People, this is a very common thing that you encounter. They only trust you. You get invited to the family birthdays. You get Christmas presents. You really become part of their lives. And I've heard so often people say, "Oh, but they only like me." Yeah, I understand that. But if you've made the decision to grow your business, they will learn to love someone else, and they will become attached to someone else if you manage that really well. And that was my job for 12 months, is to manage the transition, to say I'm going to replace myself with so-and-so over the next few months, and then transition that bookkeeper in. And there was one client who I resisted that for a long time, and Pete kept saying to me, "When are you going to speak to that doctor? When are you going to speak to the doctor?" And I go, yep, I'm going to do that. And I kept putting it off until finally I thought, I can't go back to Pete and say, I got too busy again. I can't, that excuse is old. And so I finally broached the subject with the specialist, and he said, "Oh, great. Okay, well, that's fine. When is the person starting?" And I went, all that time when I'd been creating, he's going to say this, and then I'll say that, and then what if he says this, I'll come back with that. I created this whole conversation in my mind about how it was going to work, and he just said, "Yeah, great, okay, well, I trust you, so I'm sure you'll make it work, and I'll let you know if it's not." It was all very straightforward. So a lot of stuff we imagine, but that is one of the biggest hurdles, is to go through. So the first step is to create a list of your existing legacy clients and write down things. I like Excel spreadsheets, but do it whichever platform you use, but you have columns and you put things like the name of your client, how many hours a week, a month, whatever it is that you do for them, whether it's on-site or off-site, what software they're using, if they've got staff, just a brief dot points of what kind of processing it is. What you're trying to determine there is how complex it is, whether it's got a lot of payroll or does it have inventory, things that are a little bit more complex. And the final column that I always recommend putting in is, and excuse the language, but a pain in the backside column. So these are clients who might be a little bit antsy, a little bit touchy. You'll know who I'm talking about. You'll be thinking of people now. They ring you, they're anxious, they contact you a lot. The thought of telling them that you're going to replace yourself with another bookkeeper, they're kind of alert. On the alert, you think, "Oh, I don't know how they're going to react." So have them on that list, and then sort them from the easiest clients, easiest processing, to the most difficult down the bottom. Or if you really want to knock off the big ones first, do it the other way around. But I started with the easiest ones because I needed to ease myself into what the conversation was going to look like with those people. And I got better then at the conversation, so that as I moved down to what I considered to be my difficult clients, the ones that might object, I already had the message down pat. So that's a really useful exercise to go through that physical thing so that you can see visually what you're dealing with.
Absolutely. I love the idea of basically categorizing your client base so that you can see what's ahead of you, what you've got, where you should put the most attention, and how you're going to divvy up the work, really. In terms of you were bringing on staff in this next growth phase. There's going to be staff involved. What are some things that people have to think about in terms of their business system? You had created a very strong standard operating procedures, and maybe explain a little bit about standard operating procedures. I mean, you've written E-Myth Bookkeeper. You read E-Myth, the book that was written over 35 years ago, and one of the most sold books on the planet to small businesses around building systems in your business. But yet I think a lot of people don't fully understand the complexity and required detail of standard operating procedures.
Yes. You can't have too much detail. That's essentially what it is. And what I created, which is now part of the Pure Bookkeeping system, is the bookkeeping standard operating procedures. And the detail in that for your checklists needs to be excruciating. I can remember thinking as I was writing the instructions, so we've got checklists and then we've got manuals which explain what's in the checklists. And honestly, it's kind of makes you, I'm scratching my skin at the moment. It kind of makes your skin crawl. It can be so excruciating, the detail, because the things that common mistakes, which I made in my business as well, was writing these checklists. I'd go bang, 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 bang. I think these are the top 6 things I need to do. They'll know the other stuff. I'm sure they'll, do these other things. I don't need to document that because all good bookkeepers know how to do that or know that they need to do that. But that's the mistake. You have to walk them through each step individually and in excruciating detail. And unfortunately, there's no easy way of doing that except starting. And again, I used Excel. You might use Jetpack Workflow, put something online so that you've got your checklists all there. But don't assume that the bookkeeper, to start off with, don't assume they're going to do it right, and don't assume that they're going to do it the way you want it done. So that's the big thing. Because even if you've got an experienced bookkeeper, my saying is if you put 10 bookkeepers in the room, there would be 10 different ways of doing the same thing, and half of them would be wrong. So you can't assume that they're going to get it right, and don't assume that they're going to do it the way you would do it. They were 2 of the biggest mistakes I made, the assumptions that I made when I was starting out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting angle here is that a business owner, a person that's decided to build a bookkeeping business, has a certain way of thinking. And a person who wants to work for a bookkeeping business has a certain way of thinking. And then there's a person who eventually wants to own their own bookkeeping business and wants to start by working for a bookkeeping business. So all these different ways of thinking, and if you put all 3 of those in a room doing the books, you'd have different ways of doing the books, but you'd also have different attitudes towards doing those things.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
The willingness to do it somebody else's way, or how you would tackle something, and would you cut this corner? Would you do you have to go that much here or this? So if you're the owner of the business, that's your duty, is to determine how do we do this? What is our business going to be about? Are we going to be doing it, with extra effort and extra detail on all these steps, or not? And so that can, I think people often forget about that. The people you're hiring to the business, the aim, the whole point is to actually have a system, a business that runs independently of the creator. And you can't do that unless there's one way to do a majority of the work.
Yeah. And you also, so when you're having that conversation with your legacy clients, when they are nervous about you leaving, because perhaps you, and certainly in my experience, I rescued them so that they were in a mess. They had a mess left behind by a bad bookkeeper. Many of the listeners would understand that, would have had that experience. So they might be feeling a little bit nervous. And my conversation was, listen, I'm going to guarantee the quality of the work. That's it. The buck stops with me. Whatever happens, you will not have to deal with. I'm dealing with that. Now, the only way I could guarantee the quality of the work is to make sure the bookkeeper was doing it the way I wanted them to do it, and not to assume that they would, because they won't. They won't.
Absolutely. And so now there's this interesting development with workflow software. Workflow software, wasn't accessible. That was probably
No.
exists. It probably nothing compared to what's available today, even then. But if you wanted workflow software, you probably needed to go and get $500,000 to buy a big honking piece of software from SAP, and then spend another $500,000 implementing that SAP software, enterprise software. Today, there is software like Carbon HQ and Arrow and Jetpack Workflow and Asana and Trello and Teamwork by Google. I mean, all of these pieces of software that enable you to bring to life all of those standard operating procedures in a closed loop system, which is really exciting.
Oh, if honestly, the opportunity for bookkeepers now is like to reach the levels that I reached. I believe it's possible to do that much quicker than I did because of these fabulous software programs. My business was built on the back of Excel spreadsheets, but I had to pay an operations manager 60,000 to 70,000 Australian dollars a year to run my business, basically. So that's what it cost me every year to run my business. And you can get these programs now for, just such a small amount. But not only that, you remove the human error kind of thing where something falls through the cracks because, I forgot to check that thing over there. You have things like Jetpack Workflow and Carbon and the other ones that have all your checklists on there, and they have alerts. And the other big thing is tracking all the emails that go through with your clients. I had to create folders in the email platform that I was using to keep all the emails together for each particular client. It's just so much more streamlined now. So people, that's the exciting thing about the industry.
Absolutely. And we're hearing lots of our community talking about what this is doing to their practice. I was at a bookkeeping conference recently and speaking to a couple of our community members, and I said, "How are your staff liking using Jetpack Workflow?" And they said, "Well, we love it, but our staff love it more." And I just about fell down when I heard that. Bringing in a new piece of software into an organization, it's change. And so anytime there's change, people push back on change. But if the software helps your life get easier, if it makes your job easier, if it works for you, then those users are going to love it because they're like, you just made my life easier.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm super excited about that. And one of our community members, Lisa Campbell Marchese, actually worked to put Pure Bookkeeping into Jetpack Workflow. And so it's helped, we're talking about 20, 30 different community members that are now using this in their business. And it's just taking their business to a whole new level. So for those listening, if you're interested if you haven't looked yet at workflow software, we'll put a link in the show. Lisa has put together a video of how she's using workflow software. And it's very, very good to just sort of understand where the opportunity lies using workflow software. And in this case, it's with Jetpack Workflow.
Oh, yes. It's a game changer. It's absolutely a game changer. And I was so excited when Lisa put her hand up to work on that project because the automation of the Pure Bookkeeping system, well, that's the future, where you take the systems that I created, which are all very thorough and in Excel and been developed even by our community over the last 8 years, put them in an automated platform where you can set up all your bells and whistles and notifications and all those sorts of things. That's a game changer. That's really, that's very exciting. It
really did. I remember taking a productivity course. This was like 15 years ago, and it changed my life. The program was called Mission Control. And the concept of Mission Control was to put your entire life into a closed loop process. I don't know if I'm saying it exactly right, but closed loop is what's going to happen and by when is that going to happen, and have that be recorded. So if someone asked me to send a letter to somebody, the way I need to close loop that is, number one, they need to close loop it on their end by saying, Michael, by when will you do it? They record that. They've assigned it to me so that I know that they have recorded it, that it's in existence, that this is going to get done. And then for me, it's to say, okay, put it in my calendar that on this day, I'll send the letter and I'll know everything I need to know about doing that particular task is in the calendar and done deal. When that's done, it's going to remind me that it's done. It's got a place in my calendar. Someone that's depending on it knows that it's, calendar to get it done. It's closed loop. Now, what happens to my brain when that happens is my brain forgets about it because it no longer needs to be keeping track of that one item. And I think that's one of the key pieces that this is bringing to a bookkeeping business owner's business is that they have with this technology the ability to create a complete closed loop system. Here's all the tasks that you need to do. Here's how to do all of those tasks and all of the intricate details of making sure that those tasks get done and get done correctly. But then as well, you have the ability to assign the work to people. You get to see all of the in-between conversations that are happening, and there's dates that you can have reminders and deadlines put onto that. Now, what that does, that is like that's an ancient remedy for a great night's sleep.
Oh, absolutely. And I probably lost years of my life waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, was that done? Oh, I better write that. I used to have a pen and paper beside my bed so that I could write down all the different thoughts because I just remembered in the middle of the night. And I know there are listeners to this program who are going through that now. And and you may even be at the point where you've got one or two staff and you've got so many clients, you just physically and mentally cannot keep track of everything that's going on with each one of your clients. So to utilize something like Jetpack Workflow or Carbon or one of the other programs is really going to save your sanity and also enable you to grow a bigger business more quickly. There is one other key to that, and that is recruiting. And we may not have time to talk about that and some of the things that they need to look out for when they're recruiting. Michael, do you want me to say a little bit about that now?
I think we can touch upon it, but I think we should tee that up for another conversation. I know we've talked about it in the past, but this is one that pains me to great amounts, is hearing about how the hiring has gone wrong and how much pain and suffering and cost it's causing for small businesses. And so I'm sure that this is a whole episode, probably multiple episodes, to talk about this and how to get it right.
Yeah, and when we were talking about systems for the bookkeeping, in the pure bookkeeping system, we've got the HR, the recruitment process. The one tip that I would give you is to find some way of testing. So it's all very well having the bookkeeping systems, but if you can't be confident that the person that you've recruited is actually any good, then no bookkeeping system that you've created will accommodate that. It won't fill the gaps of their lack of knowledge or experience. You need to find those bookkeepers first, and the way to do that is to find some way to test them. And that might be just getting them online in the software and asking them how to move around the software. You might ask them key questions about how would they process this if they found this situation. Just find some way of testing them before you actually recruit them.
Absolutely. And as well, I mean, Pure Bookkeeping has, I think, the planet's best way to do that. I mean, our human resources program, which it's called the human resources program, but I think it's misnamed in that it's not really about human resources. It's about hiring great bookkeepers. How do you do it, right? It's like, here's how you find them. Here's how you attract them. Here's how you test them. Here's how you validate whether they're good. Here's how you find out if they have the right character to be inside of your business. And there's all of these different stages that enable you to really get who they are within a sequence and a sequence of events. Now, here's what I hear all the time, Deb. It's a lot of work, and people are looking for a shortcut. If there's a place to not look for a shortcut, please, everyone listening, do not look for a shortcut in hiring staff. And do not trust just your intuition, because it likely is not your intuition that's speaking. It's your deep desire to solve the problem and pain that you're in when you need staff, because often you've waited too long and you need to get people in to help so you can get caught up, so you can, deliver on the promise you've made to all your customers. But going too fast and rushing the hiring process is one of the big mistakes that every single entrepreneur, I don't care what business owner, entrepreneur, executive, you name it, there is a hard and fast saying, and it is fire fast, hire slowly, because you want to get it right. So you don't have to fire fast, right? And when you do realize you've made a mistake, it likely isn't going to get much better. So if you can take care of that on the front end, before you've engaged and brought them into your organization and put time into training them, put all that effort and time and energy into it, you're going to be so further ahead. I mean, it's just every week, it seems, I have a conversation with a bookkeeping business owner that tells me about their horror story of the staff that they had. And it's not, we're not talking little bits of pain and suffering. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars in extra cleanup work. So not only do you pay people, say you had somebody on for 6 months and you've paid them $20,000, $30,000. Well, if you've got to go back and clean, there could be $10,000 or $15,000 in cleanup work that needs to get done.
Yep, which you can't charge the client for.
That's right, and it's all and we're not even getting into the big stuff where you may have caused business continuity issues with your clients.
Oh, and there's legal ramifications with that potentially.
Absolutely. So this is a big one, and I think warrants a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
And it's one of those that we all experience in every business, and so I think we owe it to do it good justice. So keep an eye open for that episode. We will do our best to get Debbie back on and have another episode. And we're pretty much up out of time. Deb, is there anything you want to cap off around this next growth phase in terms of where bookkeepers are when they're looking to scale up their business?
I think the time factor is a huge thing. And I remember saying when Pete asked me that question about if I could take the systems in my head and document them, and I said, and I actually remember saying to him, what time of the day am I supposed to do that? Like midnight till dawn, like instead of sleeping. Who needs sleep anyway? That's overrated.
That's right.
But the fact is that you have to make the time. And I guess maybe another tip, because I've spoken to a lot of bookkeepers about this recently, when I talk about making time, and this is probably another podcast here, Michael, if you are not tracking your time, I know there's this whole conversation between billable and, hourly and value-based pricing and fixed fees, and that's not going into that now. But in my view, you need to be tracking all your time. So that's not just billable. You need to be tracking where you're spending your time, because if you don't do that, how are you going to find out where you can find some more time? The analogy is with money. If you're saving up for a holiday or a house or a car or something big, and you need to save $5,000 in the next 12 months, but you've got the fixed income, you think, well, okay, how am I going to find $5,000 out of the income that we generate bring home? All right, I better track what I'm spending so I can make decisions about where else to spend that. And then you can find that $100 a week that you need, or whatever it is, to save up for the next 12 months. Same with your time. I'm saying that you need to make time to create the systems and recruit the right people and put in this automation and all these things on top of the work that you're billing out to your clients. So if you don't know where you're spending your time, how are you going to make decisions about whether where you're spending it is actually in the right area and being productive?
love that. And it's to bring back to a productivity course. If you've not done one, a productivity course, one of the key things you're going to do is you're going to track your time. Time management is difficult. There's no question about it. Managing your time, if you're in this phase of your business, it's challenging to pull yourself out of the business enough to build the systems. But if you're committed to having a business that runs itself, that gives you freedom from stress, gives you freedom to do things that you want to do, you have to commit and actually start doing it.
And I'd like to add that pure bookkeeping can help, and it may be one of the tools that you use. I'm confident that we can help you automate your business in a fraction of the time it would take you to do it.
I completely agree. I've seen people work years and years, just like you did, Deb. You worked years and years to build this business and then made it available so that others could take it and input it into their business. Still takes work. But it'll go much more quickly. So thank you, Deb, for sharing that, and hopefully people will be able to see some opportunity there.
My pleasure.
Deb, it's been so great having you on the show, and I really want to have you back again to talk about a couple of these different concepts, and we will hopefully do that over the next couple of months.
Lovely. I really enjoyed it. As always, Michael, thank you very much.
Beautiful. That wraps another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.